Thank you for joining us for Talks with Tyler ISD, where we share with you the successful stories of students, alumni, programs, and staff here at Tyler ISD. I'm your host, Jennifer Hines, and joining us today is our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Marty Crawford. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. Some of the things that we're going to be talking about today is how we've been doing so far this school year. We're now in year 2 of the pandemic, and we have opened our doors wide this school year, doing all in-person learning.
Yeah, school year 3 of the pandemic, if you go back to the spring of 20, to where we didn't complete that year.
Correct.
We just think this doesn't seem like that long ago where we were worried about whether or not we were going to be able to have in-person graduation. And that worked out for us well. And, certainly the second graduation that we had that night, we wound up having a lightning strike right when it started. So very apropos for a pandemic year to finish that 2019-2020 school year. And then last year was a very successful year. There was some learning regression, but we certainly, because we were in person for most of the year, didn't see that regression like our peers did across the state. East Texas really was the vanguard in regard to valuing in-person learning. And then here we are in year 3 of this pandemic, or 2.5 maybe, and we're trucking along. So proud of our students and our staff for doing what they've done with a lot of distractions out there. We are really holding successful student outcomes as our core.
Now, talking about doing the in-person versus online, we made that decision fairly early last year. We've seen the fruits of that decision, so to speak, not just academically in the scores that we're seeing that have not slid like some of the other districts out there that we're seeing actually in the news right now, but including the social emotional part of it. I mean, that's a huge chunk of the need for in-person.
Yeah, there's a place for virtual learning. And I think that if the pandemic raged like they thought it would, like it would continue to have done, that we'd have seen some more districts probably adopt some of those things. But, trying to hold on until you absolutely just cannot hold on to it anymore, in-person learning is certainly an invaluable tool that we have. I mean, we've been doing it for over 150 years in the state of Texas, ever since we started here in Tyler ISD, I think 130 years, I think since 1882 in Tyler. But the social emotional aspect of it, making sure that other needs are being met, not just the academic needs, I think is something that's a very important thing when you start talking about East Texas school systems. And Tyler is the largest of the East Texas school systems. We have held true to in-person learning, and the success is being realized now and will be realized in the future as well.
And we did, looking back to last year, we did see some of our numbers drop due to COVID concerns. Back then we still didn't really have a good handle on what this was going to look like, what COVID really looked like, and now we're seeing them come back. Yeah,
we were really concerned last year, especially our early childhood learners, pre-K and kindergarten. Parents were a little uncertain about what that meant. Some were a little bit concerned about any of the protocols we might have had in place. Of course, the economy was kind of lurching back and forth, so some may have not had the consistent employment that they have now. And so we understood what they were going through. We tried to meet them where they were at. But now we're back up. We're kissing what our enrollment was pre-pandemic. I think we were at 18,200 students. We're over 18,000 right now. And, after Labor Day, that's when things kind of balance out, kind of level out. New students come in. Students might leave the school system for another school opportunity. So we're right there at it. And we're excited about that, which means there's a little bit of normalcy that's starting to creep back into educational operations here in Tyler ISD. And we're very proud of that. We're very thankful for the confidence that parents have entrusted in us, and give our community some credit. They understand what's going on. They're able to decipher data. They're able to decipher the news media and make make a decision that's best for themselves and for their children. And we're just tickled to be able to offer the education we are offering.
Yeah, it is great to see them back. I want to say we have around 350 students that kind of ducked out for a year last year. Some of those, especially in the lower grades, as you mentioned, pre-K and kinder, we saw 120 of those kindergartners come back this year, so that's great to get them in that pipeline. So that's the good news, is that the students are returning. Of course, we do have to talk about the elephant in the room that you had kind of touched on, and that is COVID, and that there are still some concerns out there. And again, our focus is successful student outcomes, and not even a virus can change that. A lot of people may not realize this, but school districts have been battling viruses and diseases for hundreds of years. I mean, this is nothing new for us to battle. It's just a different virus this time.
Yeah, no doubt. Over 100 years, Texas school systems have had to deal with this, and certainly not this specific one, but you have some enhanced things that are also working on that. You know, the great thing about the internet and social media is there's a lot of information out there. It's just upon us as Americans and Texans and East Texans and Tylerites to decipher that and get it down to the local level to see if the things that are being provided to us by media, by social media, if they're impacting us on an individual basis. And you know, allowing the some of the protocols that we had in place last year, especially some of our cleaning practices, to remain. Those are just things that we've been doing. We've just enhanced them maybe a little bit. Right. But some of the other protocols that we have in place, you know, we'll save those for whenever they're needed. And I'm very proud of parents and students who have chosen to go above and beyond some of the other protocols that we have in place in the previous year, and continue some of that now, even though that's maybe not as prevalent throughout the entire community like it was this time last year.
Well, I think one of the things that parents may not have realized is we do have a lot of in-depth cleaning that goes on a normal year, whatever normal is now. I mean, yeah. It's different, but we already had a lot of those things in place. It was just ramping it up. They probably didn't know about it because we didn't really talk about it. It wasn't something that you really put out there that much. And so now I think there's a little bit more of a focus on it, but parents can take comfort in knowing that we already had a ton of systems in place, deep cleaning of schools, all sorts of things that would happen on a daily basis, quarterly, monthly, yearly, that we were already doing. One of the big differences from last year to this year, and of course, once again, it's out of our hands, is the whole mask issue. Mm-hmm. Last year, we were told we had to have it. This year, they're saying we can't have it. It's been an issue that we've had to address.
No doubt. And you know, again, I think personal choice has been one of these things, as this political football has been played back and forth with schools right in the middle of it, not just on the COVID issues, but a lot of other things that are going on in our country. We've had to really, you know, take a stance and say that this is how we're going to do things, and you know, not everybody's going to be pleased with that. I will say this: I think that one thing that the pandemic has probably improved is the communication of things that are being done already in our school systems. You mentioned the cleaning is the same thing. Mm-hmm. We've said the entire time that we've highly recommended those that feel like they need to wear face coverings and masks to stop the spread or prevent some of the disease from reaching them is something that we encourage. Mm-hmm. We are certainly not going to ban mask wearing, but at the same time, we're not going to mandate it. Our board voted to continue on with the protocols that we have in place last week, and we'll continue to do that. Again, we reserve the ability mm-hmm. to be able to put some of these things in place if the data supports it. You know, a lot of folks like to say that this spike occurred when schools came back into session. Saw some charts over the weekend. It started in July. Mm-hmm. No doubt about that we're just going through the ebbs and flows of a pandemic. That happens, and we are certainly here positioned to do what we can by also having school. And people also need to understand that we're an educational organization. Right. We're not a healthcare organization. We leave that up to the big hospitals and those in the community that are responsible for that. So we're in-person school. If folks want to do things themselves to protect themselves, we certainly encourage that. In fact, I do that some as well whenever I get into a situation to where I feel like I need to put some extra precautions in place. I do that for myself. I do that for my own family as well.
And that's the beauty of the Return to School 2021-2022 plan, is that we have in there the flexibility. We have updated it since we first put it out because we do look at the data and we do have behind the scenes, quote unquote, meetings. I mean, we talk to Net Health, we talk to the hospitals. You just mentioned you were looking at data over the weekend.
Yeah.
This is something that isn't just, oh, this is the decision and it's never going to change. Parents need to take comfort in knowing that these are ongoing conversations that happen almost daily, if not weekly, where we are in touch with all of the people that need to be, that need to give us the information so that we can make the best decisions.
Yeah, it's consuming. It is certainly something I did not go to superintendent school for, was to how to manage crises like this. I mean, it does some crisis management that does occur in those graduate school classes that we have, but nothing compared to this. And it has been a 24/7 project in regard to communications between us. And let's just take Christus, for instance. You know, we're self-funded as a healthcare system. We're not part of the TRS Active Care. So we have an advantage that we do have a healthcare partner as our official healthcare partner, Christus, and being able to talk to their officials along with some of their medical experts there is certainly something that we've relied upon. And then trying to balance out what the data looks like and what the suggestions are and how we'd be able to effectively implement that is something we have been watching it as well. Not to mention that we do anecdotal stuff and look in the community and see how the community is reacting to certain things that are put in place.
Yes.
And
You have to observe those community behaviors and then make sure that you're following the data, not politics.
No doubt. And, you know, you've got to understand, what will your community back? And regardless if it's a pandemic or not, it's just what decisions will a general community back? What are the practices that they're putting in place as well? And I think you can go across our community to see that in regard to masks, it's been very difficult to put this in place, especially with, Austin's interference, the governor putting that out there. I'm very concerned about some of the local control things that are being infringed upon in regard to that. But then again, you start talking about local control. Our board voted to keep the protocols in place that we have now. That's local control right there. So I just really wish that we would stay out of the school systems in regard to Austin, Texas, and let the local school officials who have been elected by its community make those decisions.
Yeah, because they know the community best, and our communities are very different when you look across the state of Texas and how they do react to different things and what they will back. Looking ahead, it's kind of like there's always okay, what's next? We're moving on, and our focus, again, successful student outcomes as always. This year does look different than last year. We are opening up our doors a little bit more. We're inviting those volunteers back onto our campuses. And I think this is a great time to talk about what the community can do to support our school district and to support our local schools, because we are allowing some of those things again.
Yeah, no doubt. Even extracurricular activities feel much different than last year, where we had very tight social distancing guidelines in place. But if you go to football games now, we've had fairly packed stadiums without these outbreaks inside of our school system that so many people have predicted nationwide. If you start looking at college football games and pro football games, you get that down to the local level at the high school. We are still able to have our extracurricular events, and again, looking at data and making sure that we're doing what we're saying we're going to do, and making sure that we're not just being reckless. And it's been exciting seeing our community at these community events. Caldwell had its 20th anniversary this past week, and seeing the smiles on their faces as we've been doing some of these things that's a more normal than what we're used to. That's been invaluable and exciting as well. So when you start talking about what's next, getting back to some of the routines that we took for granted before the pandemic hit. We're going to continue to have successful student outcomes as our priority. Teaching and learning is extremely important. Taking the school system from a solid B to an A has never lost it's momentum here in the district. We've just had this other challenge we've had to deal with. We're just not going to let that consume us, because again, we're an educational institution, and we have healthcare folks in the community that lead us, and we're certainly listening to them, and they can lead us through that. So, taking responsibility for what we're responsible for, and that's the education of our youth here in Tyler and in Smith County, is something that's never going to go away, and we're going to value that every day that we show up for work.
Absolutely. And we do welcome the community's support. We welcome the volunteers back into our schools. And for those that are looking for a job out there, hey, we are hiring. We've got openings for bus drivers, substitutes, custodians. So we are in that hiring process year round. I mean, you always are when you have a district the size of ours. It takes a village, so to speak, to keep everything running. So that's great news that we have those
no doubt.
openings.
I mean, if you look at our school buses, we've got advertisements on our school buses. You know, if you want to make an impact on the youth of Smith County, and you're not an educator, come drive a bus for us. Come work in our schools as a custodian, or come substitute teach for us as well. So school districts across the nation, across Texas, across Smith County, are all struggling with those support roles. And this is not something that's just pandemic driven. This happened before. So we're always looking for that. We'll take care of you. We value you as an employee. And what a great way to give back to your community, but by working inside of school systems.
Well, we do want to say, whether it's listening to this podcast or volunteering in our schools, maybe at the next school function, we welcome everyone's support and truly appreciate them. Is there any departing thoughts that you would like to share with the listeners of the podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just very, very pleased with how the school year is going. And a lot of that can be said because of how much support we do have from the community. Sometimes it's the loudest voice out there that really distracts us from our mission. And we're not going to be distracted from our mission, and that's making sure that we have successful student outcomes. That's been the priority for our school system for the past 8 years, and it's not going away. Regardless of what type of detractors there are out there. So I think that's what gets reported on. Internally, our teachers are happy, our students are being successful and coming to school every day ready to learn. And that's what a school system is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be this political thing that's out there, even though there's a lot of folks that are trying to make it that way. So very proud of what's going on at Tyler ISD, and certainly awesome that I'm able to sit here and say hello and validate these things from a podcast.
And it's great to see that our focus continues to remain on successful student outcomes. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Crawford. Sure. And thank you for joining us for this episode of the Talks with Tyler ISD podcast. We hope that you subscribe on Apple Podcast and Spotify. Be sure to share this podcast with your friends and family.